Good evening, everybody. You are listening to Mexican Crossing Lines with your hosts, Cindy Gomez-Schempp.
And Duke Gomez-Schempp.
And this is Mexican Crossing Lines. Now, tonight's show is titled Native Lives Matter. And I want to have a conversation with you about this movement, which you may have not heard of, which has not gotten a lot of traction in the media. And there's a reason why. Because it has been inserted in an uncomfortable position to compete with Black Lives Matter. And this is problematic for the people in the Black Lives Matter movement just as much as it is for the people in the Native Lives Matter movement, because they work together. Right? We saw them working together at Standing Rock and beyond. We've seen Black Lives Matter pair up with Native Lives Matter at all sorts of different groups and protests, etc. The problem, however, within the Native Lives Matter is that, as we have all been told by Black Lives Matter leadership, you can't come into a vigil for a dead Black person that was hosted by Black Lives Matter leadership and march in with your All Lives Matter sign or your anything else Lives Matter sign. Not that other lives don't matter. In fact, all lives matter. But is it the appropriate time when Black Lives Matter is hosting an event, right, to come in with your "but all these other lives matter" poster or sign? The hosts of any such event for Black Lives Matter would say no. You would be considered a counter-protester. Although your rights of free speech would be upheld, it wouldn't be seen as an allyship type of thing to walk in and superimpose your message on top of theirs. And that is one of the reasons why we have to address this Native Lives Matter movement. Of course, you haven't heard much about it because it is so controversial. And it is in competition with a nationwide, worldwide movement to stand up for African American lives specifically. Notice Asian lives, Mexican lives, Latino lives, Native lives, they're not part of the Black Lives Matter. And so that's part of the equation of what tonight's show will discuss. The other part of this, which I think is even more important, is a discussion about where Native activists that have partnered with Black Lives Matter ever since we saw them working together at Standing Rock are now in a situation where, on the heels of the protests and many riots that we've seen all across the country, there is now a movement to remove statues of slave owners and colonizers and, the founders of this country, most of whom are white, considered white settlers, right? We don't know for sure how far people want to go with this, but what I do know is that Native Americans are inserting themselves in the forefront of this conversation. Yes, in the forefront, in front of Black Lives Matter in many cases, saying, we have the moral authority to say why each of these statues. Because if you're Black Lives Matter and you want to get rid of all of the Confederate soldier statues, you want to get rid of all the Confederate flags, you want to get rid of anything that harkens to slavery or celebrates slave owners or the Civil War that sought to keep slavery, that is an offense to African American lives. But what about George Washington? What about any Jefferson? What about anyone else? Well, that's where Native Lives Matter come in. Because, see, they have the moral authority to say everyone on this continent is standing on stolen land. If you're here, you're already on stolen land. So all of the things can come down. We can tear down any monument, any structure, and that is exactly what they're going to ask for people to do, in addition to giving back their land. It's cute. It's cute that you're pulling down all of these symbols of colonialism, but it's not enough. It's not enough. What you need to do is pay reparations. And you have to give back the land. And I'm going to show you how many of the people associated with this Native Lives Matter / Native activists are pushing for these ideas and who they are. All of that will be on today's show. You don't want to miss this, and I ask you please to share this, as well as go to our social media sites, subscribe to all of those so you can follow our work. And of course, I would like to ask you to sustain the work of this nonprofit radio station so that we can keep bringing you research and investigative journalism like this. Right,
That's right. Fasten your seatbelt, Dorothy. We're not in Kansas anymore. Good evening, everybody. We're still in a pandemic. We're not acting any differently at this station. We're still isolating. We're in Minnesota. Things have not opened up. There's still people catching COVID, people getting sick, people dying. Things haven't changed, but we're still doing our work, and this program is our work for the day. It's a Monday. We don't like Mondays, but we're going to do it anyways. We're going to work hard today for you. If you'd like to get a hold of us, you can get a hold of us by calling our message line, leaving a message, 701-566-0917. Again, that's 701-566-0917. You can also get a hold of us by email, cindy@kpppfm.com, or me, Duke, at kpppfm.com. You can also go to our Facebook site, 88.1 Fargo Moorhead, the People's Press Project of Mexi-Can. You can head on over to our website at kpppfm.com and have a look around at our old shows. You can also go to YouTube at Duke1517. We're simulcasting tonight on Facebook and YouTube, so we can have both audiences. We would love that you could share it in any way you can on YouTube. You figure out a way to share the stream so people can go on to YouTube. Facebook, it's easy. You just got a little share button there. Share it with your friends. Post it on your page. Let other people know about it. And thank you for joining. And just one more thing. I got a haircut. Cindy cut my hair, and that way I don't look like a heathen anymore, and I thank you kindly and enjoy the show.
Why, thank you. I would say that you look a lot better than just not a heathen. I mean, your haircut looks pretty dang nice, if I do say so myself. Okay, folks, so how did this get on my radar? This is what happened. After Standing Rock, I was baffled by seeing groups that I didn't even realize were at Standing Rock at the time, or that had played any prominent role at Standing Rock, not only working in conjunction with the leadership of those that brought this protest camp to North Dakota for over a year, but that they were from groups I would have never dreamed, like the Rainbow Family or the Burning Man people. Now, for those of you who don't know what the Rainbow Family is, I would ask you to go back to previous shows in which I talked about the Rainbow Family and also Google them. But let me just give you an overview for those of you who don't know what the Rainbow Family is. It is a group of predominantly white hippies that don't want to be part of society. In other words, they don't want to work to be able to live in society. They feel that is wrong. They are most famous for taking up national parks, occupying national parks to create sustainable communities and grow their own food illegally, because it is illegal for them to do that. And there's all sorts of horrible crimes, including murders that have happened within the rainbow people, the rainbow tribes, the rainbow families. I won't get into it, but look it up. Point is, I never would have imagined that Native American leaders that were fighting for this prophecy-driven goal of protecting the Missouri River would pair up with a bunch of people that have a history of appropriating land that isn't theirs, occupying land that isn't theirs, so that they can, live off the land without having to contribute to society. Those things didn't. Or that they would be working alongside groups of people that appropriate their culture for fun, for kicks, that go on drunken and drug-filled orgies while wearing war bonnets at Burning Man. You would think, right, that the leadership of something that is supposed to be sacred and driven by Indian leadership, that they would never have anything to do with either of those groups, but they did. And those groups were prominent at the camp. And also, afterwards, I saw them all working together in Mexico. Native Americans, Lakota people from North Dakota were traveling to Tijuana to help the members of the caravan. And they were working alongside Antifa leaders like Evan K. Duke III. And I thought, what's going on? This is not normal. And of course, in my previous shows, I told you that they have formed this alliance between Native American groups, Black Lives Matter, and many other, groups that showed up at Standing Rock, including the leaders of the Women's March, and of course, the Rainbow Family, Burning Man, and many other hippie, New Age, climate, social justice, and climate justice advocates. Okay? And so I started to track not just what they do, who they are as groups, and what their history is, but what they're working on together. What is their goal as a group of people working on these campaigns, like the one we see right now for George Floyd? Well, let me show you what they posted about Chaz. This is a post, a photograph from the Capitol Hill Autonomous Zone, Chaz, or as it's now known, the Occupation Protest, CHOP.
Yep.
And what do you see standing there in front of a Antifa-led white people, if there was ever anything like it in the world, occupation, protest, but two Native women. Two Native women speaking to this group of people. Why would Native leaders go to the Chaz or the CHOP or the Burning Man or any kind of festival that appropriates them, that appropriates their history? Why would you do that? There's a reason why. I've seen them again and again. Let me show you more evidence. By the way, for those of you who've been following the Caravan Support Network and all of the different groups that I have been highlighting to you that started off at Standing Rock, look at what else is behind those two ladies that were speaking. You can see in this photo the corner of her shirt the corner of her skirt, and right behind her was this sign that has affinity groups listed on it that are at the Chaz, at the CHOP. These affinity groups include security, medics, mutual aid. What is mutual aid code for? That's Antifa. Those are their words. Mutual aid comes from their jargon. Demands for accountability, musicians, acts, culture, and residents. Okay? Thank you to those of you supporting us on our YouTube. Thank you for those of you out there that are supporting independent media, Mrs. Red Badger, She says she will join us. Oh, Miss Red Badger donated, and she said, I'm going to need a drink. Yes, get some popcorn too, because it's
Exactly.
going to be wild what you're about to learn. And Sherry, thank you so much for your support too. She joined Miss Red Badger in donating to our station tonight. Here's to supporting great independent journalists. Cheers. Yes. Salud. All I have is water, but salud. Cheers. And let me show you that Chase Iron Eyes, who I just told you recently is now running Unicorn Riot. He's messaging for 2020, land back. That's the message from Native Americans. They want their land back. And we have to have a serious conversation, because this is in conjunction to Master P and the fight with Black Lives Matter for Mr. Floyd's justice, right? These are the protests for George Floyd, for his death, and for all black men that are being slaughtered by police under Black Lives Matter. And Chase says, land back. He's not talking about African Americans in the United States, because they're not original landowners on this continent, right?
Right.
So let's talk about what that means, because I am a First Nations person. Okay, I'm a Mexican. So that means if we get our land back, right, that means that the people that are already living here would have to go somewhere else. Where are you going to go, Duke?
I don't know. Mexico.
No, that's not your land. Where do the people that already live here go? Because
to Europe, where you've never been before. You know?
Because let me tell you something, okay? Let me tell you something that you have to discuss here. I don't believe that Native Americans or their allies are advocating for the genocide of white people. I mean, I know there's people out there that believe that. I don't think real Native Americans, I don't think that people that are real leaders within their communities and indigenous communities are actually advocating for killing white people or putting everyone back on a boat back to Europe. I mean, that's silly, right? The ancestors that you have as a European in this country go back generations and generations. It's not like we can round up all your family members, stick you on a plane or on a boat and send you anywhere. So people that are advocating for land back or for removal of white people or white things or things that have any historical relevance to white people, to slavery, to white supremacy, or anything that can be seen as colonizer history, all those things need to go, and they're going. They're actually that's actually happening. I'm not predicting the future here. We're watching statues come down. We're watching things be destroyed. People are now proactively going from state to state and removing monuments and statues and putting them in museums so they won't be vandalized. So this is already happening. And let me show you how the people, especially people that considered themselves water protectors, leaders among those who are now protesters for Black Lives Matter, how they are calling for you and others who are not Native American to take down these statues, and how they're attacking the people in the media that are covering these stories, like Tawasi Sose in this video in Portland, Oregon. Take a listen for yourself.
Hey there, folks. So I'm here in Portland, Oregon, where a statue of George Washington has been toppled. So this is in front of the German American Society here on indigenous land that was never ceded underneath any treaty. This is actually stolen indigenous land. A lot of the settlers here don't like to acknowledge the fact that this land wasn't ceded under a treaty. They like to think that they righteously own it. But in fact, this land was stolen So here you have the predatory media here asserting their right to corporate speech, which is different from free speech. Corporate speech is distinctly for sale, and the nature of corporate speech is that it's biased and full of deception. Especially Fox News, who lies. You're a liar, woman. Free speech and corporate speech are not the same. Free speech and corporate speech are not the same.
However,
Your name tag says it all. You have no journalistic integrity. You have no journalistic integrity.
I'm sorry you're
Okay, you know what? Protesters did not turn violent. Police turned violent.
When we've said that.
Stay away from me. You stay away from me. She has to be accountable for her lies. You are a liar.
We've reported the truth.
You are a liar. Stay away from me. You are a liar.
We have to have peace.
No, no, we get murdered because of lies carried out by people like this. They tell lies about protesters. They say protesters turn violent when police turn violent. They say protesters turn violent when police turn violent. So while she says that protesters turn violent, it's police who turn violent. So why don't you report that police turn violent? Why don't you report that it's the police who turn violent? Why don't you report that it's the police who turn violent? I'm not talking to you. Why don't you report that? Why don't you report the truth?
Our neighborhood, please.
Why don't you report the truth?
This is our neighborhood.
I'm not talking to you. This is a free country. Why don't you leave? I'm Native American. You can stay away.
No, my heritage.
Stay away from me.
You don't understand.
Listen, stay away.
Don't. What is that? You need help. You don't understand me.
All right, Miss $500 shoes. I don't understand you.
My
I'm sorry, I'm laughing because when he attacks her shoes, I'm like, really? You're gonna attack her shoes? What's wrong with her shoes? I mean, she's a professional working in media. She's got nice shoes on. I would hope she would put on some nice shoes if she's gonna be on television or if she's helping produce television programming. She's got to look her best. Folks, this is what I'm sure was very jarring. This is what Tawasi looks like. I know you didn't see him because you weren't able to see. And this is actually an older picture, like before 2016. This is pre-2016, which is when Standing Rock happened. Mm-hmm. And this is a more 2016-ish and after photo of Tawasi. Can you imagine being those two women being yelled at by a guy that has got the blue eyes that Tawasi has, and the white and the fair skin and the European features that he has, and being told, I am Native, you go back to wherever, and having this person screaming at you. Can you imagine how confusing that is?
Yeah, there was a lot of profanity. I couldn't put that on the air, but every other word was bleep, 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 and he yelled and yelled and yelled at these people. And he's claiming to be Native, and it's just like, and look at the guy,
Here's the thing. I showed you videos of him before. Do you remember the show that I did on Antifa leader, the Antifa leader that created the border support network for the caravans, Evan K. Duke III, in the last round of riots that occurred in Portland, Oregon? And I showed you a video from Tawasi to show you that Standing Rock activists were present at the Portland, Oregon riots. That many of the tactics used at subsequent protests, marches, and riots all came from the cradle of Standing Rock. That is why I continue to educate folks about that. Can you imagine how strange it was for these two women to see a man that looks white as they do telling them, I am a Native American. Now, I'm not saying Tawasi Sose is not a Native American, but I will tell you what he has said. He's talked about, and this is before Standing Rock. Before Standing Rock, I went through his page as best as I could. And folks, there are people out there that already know who this activist is. If you love Tawasi, I apologize if I am taking down some sacred cow for you. I am not saying anything disparaging about Tawasi other than the fact that what he is saying and doing on behalf of water protectors or natives or Native Americans or whatever, this is what it looks like. What kind of results do you think that's going to get? Just think for yourself what you're looking at in front of you. Is that the kind of person you want speaking on behalf of natives? And is that the way that natives want to be represented? Because he's doing it, whether you like it or not. And I couldn't really find him talking about himself in terms of being a Native American, a proud Native American, until after he got to Standing Rock. And I have a problem with that. I have a problem not just with him, but with all of the other very white-looking people that showed up at Standing Rock and left with Indian names and became Indian leaderships. Because a lot of them, they are usurping the voices of the people that are native, living on the res, suffering in the trenches, going unheard and unrepresented, so that blue-eyed, white-passing Indians or half-Indians like Tawasi can speak on their behalf. And I know that there's a lot of other people that feel the same way. So I need to speak to that, because I find it problematic that the people that look the whitest, that have the least blood quantum, that have the least history of living the tradition of an indigenous person, of suffering, the issues that Native people suffer on a regular basis, are the ones that are in leadership, are the ones that are getting funded, are the ones that are getting to travel, are the ones that are getting to speak, are the ones that appear in the movies. And the same people over and over again. They get the red carpet. They get the pulpit. While the rest of natives are silenced. That doesn't help promote the real issues of natives, in my opinion. Tawasi didn't talk much about being a native prior to going to Standing Rock, but he did talk a lot about being homeless. In this post, he talks a little bit about his history, about being a homeless person in Eugene, Oregon, after leaving Eugene, having to struggle on the road, fighting for liberty and justice, and fighting against police discrimination, being an advocate for homeless people. This post goes on, and there were many others like it that advocated for, different religions, not a Christian religion, not any Christian religion, but different other religions, different movements like Black Lives Matter. Yes, he was for Black Lives Matter before Standing Rock. All sorts of different religions from India, and things that have to do with advocacy for homelessness and against police brutality. I saw a lot of that on his page prior to 2016, but not a single mention of his proud heritage as a Native American until later. Here's a post in which he actually talks about being a half-blood. Of course, this is in 2017. I'm sure he got a lot of flack when he went to Standing Rock and put himself in the leadership. He was attacked, and I'm not going to show you the video in which he talks about being attacked and being told that he shouldn't be representing Native Americans as someone that didn't represent them prior to Standing Rock, and as someone that can't speak to that culture. And he says as much in his posts and videos about being attacked for being a white man, or a half-breed as he calls himself. And in this post, he addresses the fact that he knows he's not full blood, but that whites know that I am not one of them? I don't know. I don't know that they know that. I really don't. I don't think that either one of those ladies from Fox News thought that when they were talking to Tawasi, they were speaking to a Native American elder. I'm sure that they were shocked when he screamed, "I am a Native American," at them. And the fact that he has to tell people that in order to credentialize himself should tell you a lot. He, of course, talks about how, as a white person, or as a, very white passing, white looking white man that has lived his life in this capitalist society, how does he fight against the white privilege that he has? And how does he do that? By stepping outside of consumerism, by fighting against capitalism. And even as he does this, he makes posts about wanting a job so he can make money, so he can participate. He also gives you a very clear knowledge that he is of Jewish heritage and that his mother is white. In this post, he talks about, my mom, for some reason, that same one came up. For what it's worth, he says, I am Jewish on my mom's side and Native on my dad's side. My ancestors taught me about fascism. This is a more recent post, June 21 of 2018. And in this next one, he talks about his rainbow family. This is one of those posts before Standing Rock. There were plenty of rainbow family connected posts before Standing Rock. He says on December 5th, 2015, just got picked up by the Rainbow Bus, Rainbow Road. Be good, family. That's his family, and he talks about it. I couldn't find posts of him dressing like a native, talking about being native, talking about his rich tradition, his heritage, his love of native people, fighting for native rights, or anything like that. But I did find this video of him at what looks like to be some kind of hippie festival. Okay. I don't know. You judge for yourselves. It was titled, Yes, I'm Showing Off. There's some kind of circus tent behind him, and he's got a
hula hoop.
Yeah, he's hula hooping while, what are those things?
Well, they're juggling tools.
He's juggling in one hand with balls. So he may not be able to get into, he may not be easily recognizable to most Indian tribes, but to most hippie tribes and most festival tribes, I'm sure he's recognizable. And I want you guys to know that he talks about being on a hippie commune. This is how he envisioned his future. In 2015, he has numerous posts about going and living on a hippie commune, starting a hippie commune, who would want to live in the woods. He never really talks in the past, prior to 2016, about being native. That doesn't mean he's not native. It doesn't mean he doesn't have a right to learn about his native heritage or his native culture or to be in leadership as a native person. But do you understand how it's problematic when he never talked about it until he was already doing native leadership stuff? Mm-hmm. Because you have to have a history. You can't jump to the front of the line when you don't even know your own culture and heritage and usurp the place of others. You can't do that. Not to mention the fact that he himself has reported on his page that he was attacked at Standing Rock for doing just what I said. It's the same thing when you have someone like Shaun King, who is leading in the Black Lives Matter movement as an activist, and it turns out that his birth certificate says he's white and that both of his parents are white. He says he's mixed race, but do you see how it calls into question a lot of things? Doesn't it bother you that somebody like Rachel Dolezal can get a position while being a completely white person pretending to be black, working for the NAACP in the same state that Tawasi passes himself off as a native leader? It should. Because his tradition comes from the Rainbow family. Here's another post. Fat Kids for Life, he says. This is a Rainbow family celebration. He goes every year. Don't you think that after what happened at Standing Rock, after the way that Rainbow family people suddenly became Indians and appropriated and usurped the positions and the voices of Native people at Standing Rock, that someone like Tawasi, if he is half Native and advocating for Native lives, would denounce those practices in himself and in others? Don't you think he would denounce all of those people that come from that kind of culture because it appropriates Native American culture? What do you think Burning Man is? What do you think hippie culture is and was and comes from? It's an appropriation of Native American values for white people to pontificate on while not coming from Native American tradition and not supporting Native lives. It is a comfortable way to usurp the moral authority of Native leadership onto white people by claiming something that originally came from a culture that doesn't belong to them. You considered yourself a hippie at one point. What did you see it as, Duke?
Well, I don't know. I was a kid when the hippies, I mean, we're talking in the 60s, and there was men wearing long hair, jeans, and just this anti-establishment attitude. I was brought up in a very strict household, and it was like I admired the hippies. I don't ever consider myself actually being a hippie. The whole rainbow stuff and all this stuff. I didn't want to be Native American. Although every festival I've ever went to, people appropriate Native culture and pretend that they're Native. And sometimes there's some person that looks Native that is leading all these white people and kind of selling the culture to white people. And that's nothing I ever participated in. I always thought that, apart from me, the hippies were the ones who were against the Vietnam War. And that's what I remember. And my parents were really strict. And I was just looking for ways to, kind of defy them.
Look, Native culture, which much of hippie culture is predicated on, isn't in and of itself a bad thing. The bad thing is the appropriation of a culture that isn't yours and not acknowledging the root of where that comes from, the moral foundation that you are cloaking yourself in.
Mm-hmm.
There's a reason why white people decided to wear their hair long and put bandanas around the top of their head and dress in garb that mimicked Native American regalia. They wanted other white people to look at them and think, oh, you're like an Indian, right?
Yep.
That there was a purpose to that. You weren't just wearing your hair long for fun, right? There was a purpose to that. It was to mimic something else. Otherwise, why couldn't white young kids just wear their hair natural the way they did? Why didn't they just look like the Beatles, wear them a little bit long? Why did they have to wear it long like Native Americans? Why was there such an attraction to that without acknowledging the roots of where it came from? That's the problematic part of it. And let me show you that Tawasi declared on his Facebook page that he has not only been part of the Rainbow family, but also part of Black Lives Matter and Occupy. Occupy. These are all things he has been part of. And yes, as a white man that is also Native in his background and heritage, he understands that people that go to festivals like Burning Man are appropriating Native culture, and it's not cute. Here's one of his posts from 2017. After many people from Standing Rock that were in leadership went to Burning Man, this is what he posted. I am not impressed by the fact you were at Burning Man. In fact, I just unfollowed everyone gloating about it. Gloating about it. I wonder what his reasons for being mad were. Was he mad that they went to a rich billionaire festival? Or was he mad that they appropriate Native culture at this festival and that Natives went there to support it? Either way, he wanted folks to know after Standing Rock that he is very much a Native American. But he's not enrolled in any tribe. He just has Native American blood. I am not enrolled as a Nooksack or in any tribe. Still, my ancestors walk with me. So, his ancestors walk with him, and I do not doubt that they do. I believe that whatever background you come from, whatever ethnicity you come from, whether you knew about it or not, whether you learned about it, whether you were raised in it, you have every right to enjoy it, to learn about it, to live it. What I'm talking about, and I just want to reiterate this so that people that are listening do not get it twisted, is, do you jump to the front of the leadership of a movement, of any kind of campaign, of a protest, representing all Native Americans, when you are someone like Tawasi? The answer should be no.
Yeah.
The answer should be no. No. If that's the best representation of the people that are living the issues on a daily, that know their traditions, that know their culture, that know their language, that lived on the res, that have deep connections and roots, and therefore skin in the game, therefore they're connected to whether or not those outcomes for those communities are good or bad. That's who should be at the forefront of leading any issue having to do with Native Americans. Here's what he talked about in the past about his raising. How was he raised? He said, I am half blood. I was raised on a hippie commune. So was he raised in on the res? Was he raised with Native American values? Was he raised with his Native American dad? No. He was raised on a hippie commune. I have hippie values. So when people attack hippies, I take it personally. Okay?
Yep.
He has hippie values. Now, that doesn't mean he doesn't also have Native American values. But I just want to point out that they clash. Hippie values clash with Native American values in a lot of ways because they appropriate from Native American values. So you're going to have to decide which one is most important in that kind of a scenario. Which one takes precedent in your life? The hippie values or the Native values? Tawasi also said that he is a half-breed and proud of his ancestors, and that he will not be shamed for being Jewish or Nooksack. And I don't think anybody would want to shame anyone for being mixed race. Almost everyone on the planet now is to some degree mixed. There's no shame in that. But I know that a lot of the people that are now in the leadership, now speaking on behalf of natives in the Native Lives Movement, in the protests that we are seeing right now, like the one that you just saw pulling down statues in Oregon, are led by people who once identified as mostly white, who spoke to other people, even after Standing Rock, as if the message he was sending was to the white people. Here's Tawasi messaging people on a post in 2018. What is he retweeting? A post that says, to my fellow white people. It takes some effing nerve to stand on this continent and complain about immigrants. And he reposted that with decolonize. Decolonize. So he's talking to the fellow white people, just like the other post, right? This is for the white people. Here's another post in which he clowns a little bit about his white half. Every time I try to round dance, he says, I end up square dancing. I guess I am too white. Half-breed nation.
Wow.
These are his words, not mine. And I'm sure that those things, the very white passing appearance, all of the things that I've talked to you about, led to him being called out for his behaviors at Standing Rock, and I'm sure beyond. But he understands that in this kind of a climate where people are actually telling other Americans to go back to Europe or to go back to someplace else or to get out of the country, that if you lie about your heritage, people are not going to like it. And this is what he wrote about that. He posted a video on Vimeo about telling Native Americans that you're Native when you're not. And he posted it with the comment, "You will get mauled by a bear. You will get mauled if you lie." Meaning, you will have harsh repercussions if you tell people you are Native American and you are not. And this is how he identified. He talks, this is a recent post. This is this February, this year. He said, between Rainbow Family, Occupy Wall Street, Standing Rock, and countless other direct actions, I feel betrayed by the media. So he's been at all of these things. He's been protesting. He's been traveling around from place to place with rainbow families who are basically indigents that go and stay in public spaces. Most of them are indigent. He's also a homeless advocate, which tells you more about his status as someone that's been indigent himself. He's been protesting since Occupy and since Standing Rock and beyond. Here he is posting in June. He says, when I was at Occupy, my friends had excuses why they couldn't come. Same at Standing Rock. Now it's Black Lives Matter again. And the same people have excuses. Let's just say you don't care and you prefer comfort and ease. No, that's not necessarily true. Tawasi has been a professional vagabond, homeless person, whatever you want to call it, world traveler, professional activist, con artivist, whatever you want to name it, for many, many years, even before he called himself a Native American. And he's been doing it because he doesn't have a job, because he doesn't have a place, a fixed place where he's lived continuously for years and years and years. That's why he can do that. That's why many of these people that I have shown you, their profiles and their own commentaries, their own stories, that's how they can do that. It's not because people don't care. People care deeply. And sadly, many of them end up donating to people like him. Tens of thousands of dollars. He received $10,000, he said, to distribute at Standing Rock. So if you give your money to a cause because you can't go, and you end up giving it to someone like that, you have to ask yourself, are you really helping Native Americans? Let me share with you how these folks really feel. What's our next slide? This is a post by Linda Black Elk, one of the activists at Standing Rock, talking about how, as Trump blames Antifa, protests records show scant evidence. And she posts this saying that it's funny how so many white folks have a problem with a group of people who are literally anti-fascist. And she hashtags Antifa and Black Lives Matter. The reason for this is, as I have told you, Antifa played a role at Standing Rock and beyond. Antifa and its leadership have been at the forefront of many campaigns and protests, including the caravans and now including these George Floyd protests, riots, whatever you want to call them. So you're going to see that they cover for each other and defend each other, even as they know they have been working in tandem with people that are in the leadership of Antifa, who they know to be felons, who they know to be violent, who they know to have problematic histories. And ever since Standing Rock has been over, year after year, month after month, I see repentant Indians from all over the country that participated in Standing Rock that propped up and allied themselves with Antifa, with anarchists, with white passing half Indians that jumped into the leadership like Tawasi or others that were never Indians, that just pretended to be, and called them out and said, these people need to be called out now because they are usurping the correct place of Native Americans. Let me show you what some of those look like. This is one posted by the Indian Problem.
Oh, yeah.
I showed you in the past the Indian Problem is led by, among two other Native American women, a woman passing herself off as a Miwok named Desiree Kane. Here's a post that she made, the Indian Problem made, about Messiah Sweetgrass. Messiah is, from what I have been able to discern from her past, her real name is Messiah Borsigua Hamid, that she is Puerto Rican, Latina, and Black, but not indigenous. I couldn't find any indigenous heritage, but she is currently partnered with a Native American woman, as I've shown you on previous shows, by the name of Wind River, or I believe that's also the name of the reservation. But this is their post asking for support for indigenous Black people. And Messiah says, not just today, but every day, you should be redistributing your wealth to Black and indigenous communities. So she is talking about giving your money. Let's look at this next slide. You should be giving your wealth that you have accumulated as a white settler to Black and indigenous people. And Messiah is passing herself off as indigenous at the Indigenous Peoples March, in the Wind River advertisements for support of Black indigenous people. But she is not indigenous. She is sleeping with an indigenous person, but I don't think that makes you indigenous by infusion. She asks for people to support queer, Black, and indigenous-led land project on Wind River Reservation. Here's how you can donate. The ways to donate are: you can give by Venmo or PayPal. There's a fundraiser. You can also give their land back. Also, give back their land, the land of indigenous people, right?
Right.
She's speaking for indigenous people there, even though she's not one, when she says give back their land. Because Africans people, land is in Africa, right? Yeah. Their original land. Here's her next post. She says you need to donate today to help them reach their goal. And she is carrying a child on her back. I don't think Messiah even has children. That's definitely not her child.
No.
But she is carrying it on her back, which seems to indicate that she is carrying a little Indian baby on her back that's hers.
Yeah.
A lot of these photos are staged, so be careful what you're donating to. Here is Joshua making a post, Joshua Nichols, of the Tijuana Antifa group, anarchist group that showed up in Tijuana to tell Mexicans what to do with the caravans. And he made a comment recently in which I was outing Black Lives Matter activists. And I said, and he said, funny how Cindy is calling herself an activist when she dedicates her life to disparaging activists. And Oscar Blue Ramirez replies, you know what's even more funny? That so-called activists from the United States are involved in a foreign country like mine, in Mexico, and they're bringing their BS anarchism to our country. By the way, he did not like being called out by a Mexican for being a white man in Mexico telling Mexican people what they should do in their country, and using heroes of Mexican history and calling them socialists and calling them Antifa or something else related to that, as many of these white Antifa anarchists have done in Mexico. Joshua challenges Oscar, responding that he never brought anything to Mexico. Saying Zapata was a socialist is true in his opinion. And he tells Oscar to look up Plan Ayala, and then says that he has found more anarchists in Mexico than even in the United States. He didn't bring any anarchists there. They already have Ricardo Flores Magón as a national hero. And he apparently, according to Joshua Nichols, is an anarchist. Well, let me tell you something. Go back to that post. The best part of this response from Oscar is, go back to the United States. They have a tent waiting for you at the Chaz. That was the best. I have to translate it because it's in Spanish at the bottom. But Oscar knows his history as a Mexican born and raised, and the history of all of the Mexican heroes on which he was born and raised better than any white American passing himself off as an ally to Latino people in Mexico. Okay? Mexicans know their history better than any white man coming to Mexico to tell us about our history. And that is why they resent anarchists like him doing so. But these folks feel like they have the right to usurp the conversation. That is why they are so problematic. Let me show you another example. Here's a Native woman exposing the fact that a white lady who's been passing herself off as an Indian by the name of Tanya Hansi has been getting money left and right from a whole bunch of different foundations and organizations that are supposed to be for Native Americans. And she says, so this is the list of the organizations that Tanya Hansi got money from by leading with quote unquote indigenous women. When I met Tanya, she was a white ally that wanted to work with indigenous women because they were underrepresented. I found out later she was claiming to be Lakota or Ojibwe to other women who'd never questioned her claim because she used her connections to a real Native American family for legitimacy. Tanya has misrepresented herself and profited by it being included in networks as folks thought she was representing the indigenous community. And here are the list of all of the different white-led organizations giving money to a fake Indian instead of a real Indian. The Wilder Foundation, the Minnesota Prison Doula Project, where this white woman wrote herself into grants as a quote-unquote indigenous woman doula, the Community Equity Program, the Soros Fellowship,
Mm-hmm.
Yep, the National Council for Incarcerated and Formerly Incarcerated Women and Girls, Lutheran Social Services, Voices for Racial Justice. They got that one wrong, didn't they, Duke?
Yep.
Nexus Community Partners. Oh, there's Nexus again. Root and Restore, Minnesota Sentencing Guidelines, and All Square. How many of you are okay with that? Of Native passing or non-Native people leading the charge and being promoted by pages like the Indian Project, the Indian Problem. Here's what they posted recently in addition to the Messiah Indigenous Black Project at Wind River. They posted this meme that says, I am the Lorax. I speak for the trees. The trees say, give Indigenous people their land back. You see the unified message
Yeah.
throughout?
Yeah, but I was surprised that was all Minnesota. Minnesota funders.
Yes.
Minneapolis organization.
Oh, yes. This is very local to
pretty
this.
interesting. And you're listening to KPPP LP 88.1 Fargo Moorhead, adding local color to your airwaves.
I think it's very important that you can notice that all of those funders are Minnesota funders.
Yeah.
The question is, how is it that Minnesota funders, how is it that they have gotten it wrong, that they have been funding white people passing themselves off as Indians or indigenous-led organizations that don't really represent the local reservations and tribes, led by people like Honor the Earth's leader, Winona LaDuke, who, according to her own tribesmen at the White Earth Reservation, never lived on the res growing up.
Yep.
she went to Harvard, and then she came back to the res to rep the people after she never really lived there, never really grew up there.
Yep.
That kind of representation leads to all sorts of problems for Native people and for the organizations that are funding them. All I can tell you is you got to do a better job. You have to do a better job of looking into the backgrounds of the people that you are funding and figure out if you are funding real Native Americans, if you are funding real Native American causes, if the money is actually reaching the people that deserve it and need it the most, and not fly-by-night activists that want to make money off of the movement, and certainly not by people that are there to jack the message. Listen, this very unfortunate situation happened recently to the fiance of Brennan Nastasio, that hero from Standing Rock that disarmed Kyle Thompson. If you guys recall, there was a man that came into the Standing Rock encampment with a gun, and he was disarmed by a man named Brennan Nastasio, among others. This man is now a fiance to a woman with which he's been doing work as leaders on missing and murdered Indigenous women and people causes. And they recently, or at least she recently, showed up. Her name is Josie, or she goes by Josie Tenorio Tewa. Tewa is actually the name of a Native people. It's like Lakota or Chippewa. Tewa. And so Josie Tenorio went to a Black Lives Matter protest and did this. First, you'll hear the man that is leading the Black Lives Matter protest. By the way, he is a black man. And she interrupts him to say this.
No, Black Lives Matter.
Black Lives Matter.
Black Lives Matter. Black Lives Matter. Black Lives Matter. Black Lives Matter. Your life matters and my life matters.
Brother,
Oh,
as a native sis, we're as a native sister, as a native, so this also as a Tewa, we want to also acknowledge our Tewa families and our Tewa plants and our Tewa
Okay,
grounds.
ma'am, you got it.
Natives lives matter. Natives lives matter. Natives lives matter. Natives lives matter.
All right, ma'am, you can have your time. I'm
We're
going to
here.
finish up now.
We are here in unity, and this is what it's about. We're here in unity, but I gotta say that,
Yeah, really, I got to say.
well, we just gotta make sure that our voices are heard too.
I agree that Native
I know,
lives
but
matter.
there is having
I
a
even
speech.
said when I said
And
brown,
we like that, but
Native lives.
we want to make sure that your life
I'm also
matters.
saying that
Yes, we know.
And we want to make sure that our people's lives matter
black
too.
oppression.
That was embarrassing for everyone.
Yep.
That was embarrassing for everyone. I felt embarrassed for her. She was embarrassed for herself. Did you notice how she couldn't even muster the words? Like, as she was doing it, she knew it was wrong. She was like, brother, as a sister, and also as a Tewa, I want to acknowledge the Tewa land and the Tewa plants and the Tewa people. And he's like, okay, ma'am, okay. And then she's like, no, I got to get it in. Natives Life Matter. Not only that, I want everyone here that came to say Black Lives Matter, I'm going to hijack all of these people, which, as you could see, were hundreds, if not possibly thousands. They just went on for as far as the eye could see. And I'm going to take them and make them chant for me and for Native Lives Matter instead. And I'm not going to show you the horribly embarrassing confrontation she had with that man afterwards, where she still tried to justify her horrible actions to him. And of course, he reminded her that what she did was horrible, and that she was just being rude, oppressive to black people, and abusive, because she showed up at an event that was not hosted by her or for Native Lives Matter specifically, and she took it over. And she didn't even ask permission. The man told her in the aftermath, listen, you can agree that if there was an event for Native Lives Matter and I showed up and I started yelling Black Lives Matter, that would be rude, especially if I didn't even ask to speak. You know, if you had asked me to speak at our event, I would have let you. I don't have any problems with you saying any lives matter. You can say Native Lives Matter, but you need to ask. You can't just show up and usurp a position that does not belong to you. And that is exactly what Josie Tenorio Tewa did. Sadly, embarrassingly, ineffectively, for sure. But that doesn't stop these people with these wrong-headed ideas from acting out in these very unusual and, I don't know what to call it, perplexing, troubling ways. They are not, I would argue, they are not improving the lives of black people or Native people. And here is the bottom line for these activists right now, many of the most vocal ones. This is what they have to say. Josie says, I support Black Lives Matter, White Lives Matter, all lives matter, but you all, meaning all of you people, white lives, all lives, black lives, everyone else but me and natives, you all fail to support the fact you're on Indian land, and that matters most. So don't forget it. So let's just be clear. If we're going to put these things on a hierarchy of importance, because there is one, Native lives matter most. Native land matters most. And the fact that all of the other lives, white lives, Asian lives, Latino lives, and black lives, and every other kind of life are on that stolen land, that's what matters most. That's what y'all got to remember first. Red Nation is also messaging on behalf of the Pueblo people, the Towa people, the Hakeume people in this movement to get rid of monuments. And they also are talking about the reconquest. There was a conquest by the settlers, by the colonizers. There's going to be a reconquest, and it is not going to be bloodless. And of course, there's reparations. This is what the Red Nation is messaging by Nick Estes. Toppling statues is cool. Now do reparations and land back. Imagine toppling not only the statues, but all the beliefs, all the institutions, the edifices of slave owners, Indian killers, white supremacists in the USA, including all of the founding fathers. That's a lot of edifices. You know what an edifice is? It's anything that was built.
Yeah.
That can include a monument, a mausoleum,
buildings,
any
churches.
kind of building, institution. Why, we would have to raise everything to the ground. We wouldn't be able to leave a stone unturned. And finally, I want you to know that this kind of speech is a call to violence. It's not just a call to remove all colonizers from this continent, which I've shown you. These are not my words. These are the words of the people that I am sharing with you that posted these things. Land back means you got to go. You don't get to stay on your land if you give it back to Native Americans. And it's a call for violence on the physical bodies of those who are not First Nations people. They're called racists in this post, but you get the meaning. Racists don't have to be statues for you to throw them in the river. I would ask for cooler heads to prevail before you take off half-cocked down to some protest, probably not protecting yourself from the coronavirus, and try to vandalize some monument, some edifice, or some statue that will not end racism in America, that will not change our policing in America, and that will not bring justice for Black lives or Native lives. And I certainly advocate that you look more deeply into the people that you fund and that you put in the leadership roles of organizations of Native leadership or Black leadership for that matter. Because what really matters is having adequate and equitable and authentic representation. But that's just what I think. Thank you for being with us here on A Mexican Crossing Lines with your host, Cindy Gomez-Schempp.
And Duke Gomez-Schempp.
You've been listening to 88.1 FM, KPPP-LP, Fargo Moorhead, where we are adding local color to your airwaves. Don't forget to go over to kpppfm.com/donate to support our station's work. Have a great evening.